17 or so. And what happened is, basic information about me is I'm obsessive compulsive. So once you start a project, you just go down every imaginable rabbit hole. So, I'm a genealogist, and I was doing genealogy on my family, and I was helped very much by an app called Find a Grave. I found relatives in Wisconsin, Minnesota, etc. So I thought, well, let me just have a look at the Valley. How's the Valley doing on Find a Grave? Find a Grave wasn't as big back then. It was just kind of, it's been around a long time, but it was, things get started and it takes a while to pick up. And so I looked, and there were a few memorials, but not many. And I thought, well, that's a good project. I like projects. I like to organize things. So I went ahead, as this is going to happen a lot, I guess. I went ahead and got started. I went to the cemetery district, a few meetings, told them who I was, what I was doing. And the person who just really was all over this project was Clyde Doggett. Do you remember Clyde?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Clyde Doggett and I were such partners. I was busy walking the graveyards, writing down everything on the memorials, doing all the ancestry background research, going over to Mendocino, Held Pogue Library, working with microfilm, looking at all of the obits and all the newspapers.com, going on Mendocino County indexes. If anybody likes research, that's amazing. And I worked with a fellow named Phil Carnahan. I don't know, anybody know Phil? Phil Carnahan is also a genealogist, and he is also, I don't have to explain to him ever why I keep going on this, because he understands. So, after all these years, I've ended up with about 1,760 entries in this database. And I'm not saying I got them all, but I think I've done pretty well. And so what you have in your hands is this database sorted. You know how you can sort a database by any of the columns? Okay. So what you have in your hands, because I said, oh, I know, I will give them, I'll give them all the burials up to 1900 through 1899. I thought, how many can that be? So I rashly promised Sherry, I'll do that. I'll have a handout. 184. 6 pages. So this is what you have, and this is basically the database. This one is sorted by date of death, which is right here, death year. So you can see that Rhoda was the first one. And she was up, it's Rawls Babcock. I took the Babcock off of this one because I needed a little more space, but it's Rawls-Babcock, across from the high school. And of course, all of these burials at this time, this is family cemetery. This is not a public cemetery until what, Christine, 1966 about, the first invoices in their receipt book, or 1966. So, here we go. She's the first one by 3 years. And she's buried. Her first husband was Isaac Beeson, and who was in the Bear Flag Revolt, whatever they call it. And then James, there's some question about James and his daughter. They're listed here, but they probably were buried at the ranch house. I'm not going to go through this whole database, but this little bit is interesting because they own the property where Shields is. Part of the reason it's called Shields. So most people bury their people at the ranch house, which John will be telling us about in a bit. So Dick Brown was buried in 1860. He's the first one at Evergreen. Now Evergreen was called Green Mound. wasn't called Evergreen for another 100 years, or I really don't know how long, but a long time. Which I'm disappointed it got changed to Evergreen, personally, because there's an Evergreen in Fort Bragg, an Evergreen in Manchester, an Evergreen in Ukiah, an Evergreen in Boonville. And I've had so many people who have posted their family members on our Evergreen, and I've had to contact them and say, actually, you want Ukiah. So, a little housekeeping there. So if it had been Green Mound, I think it would have been a lot easier, right? And I think it's kind of a nice name, too. So, here George is buried. This is Susan Stubblefield's stepson. She comes to Yorkville with Clive Murray in December, New Year's Eve, actually, 1859. And her, George, dies that following year. So he's really the first one that I have records of that was buried in Yorkville. Although they say in this is a very important book, this Susan Stubblefield book. You guys read this one? You know this one? You have to read the Susan Stubblefield book. Okay, I'm not going to bother doing that. Anyway, they said that there have already been graves there when they buried George. Who? I don't know. So there's always intriguing things like that. So now we're picking up one at Shields, and then some more at Green Mound, Shields, and then here's Cleve, and he joins George in Yorkville. Then it takes a little while. Then the Maccabees are in Yorkville at that time, so there's some Maccabee deaths, and on it goes. Obviously, Ingram isn't here. Ingram doesn't come around until 2000 something. So you can see there's no A. I don't know, are there any A's in that column? Look at the cemetery list and see where the first A comes in. I don't think anybody's buried down the hill in A for a very long time. So what you have is the database through 1899. If they died January 1st, 1900, you don't have it on your database. But all you have to do, because every single entry, 1,760 entries, have been uploaded to Find a Grave with all the information from the database and a lot more. I only have one little line for the database. So whatever other information I have is up on Find a Grave. So Find a Grave is an incredible resource. So if you turn everything over to the back, there's this information about Find a Grave. And this is how it works. There's a findagrave.com, which is on your computer, iPad, whatever. So here is Matt's, here is the first husband of Matt Kendall's grandmother? Margaret? Anyway, here's Margaret, and we're going to be hearing more about her. This is somebody else's family tree, Matt. Okay, this is Ancestry. It's where I have to go to a lot for a lot of information. Let's do her when she's on. This is Matt's family, and she had 2 marriages. The second one was to your ancestor. So this is what a Find a Grave thing looks like. And so I have probably put up the information about everybody in the database. If it's already owned by another person, then you suggest the edits. If you own it, you're the one that's in charge of the memorial, then it just says edits. So I'm going to, I'm going to write down her number just really, really quick. Here, let me see, what does that say? 297, what does it say? 297?
10.
310?
No. 297 10618.
Okay, that's an important number. We're going to be using this when Matt's up here because we're going to be linking her with her two sons. So this is Find a Grave. And what happens is when you get on the site, let's do somebody else that has even more information. Let's do James Henry Clow. Any Clows here? Okay, first of all, how many of you have family members in one of these cemeteries? You do. You have them in an evergreen. Her husband. Okay, anybody else? Anybody that has, okay, here's another question for you. How many of you are related to somebody else in this room?
Well, I'm sure that I am.
How many of you related to two people in this room?
Maybe we don't want to do it.
All right, well, it is true in the Valley, and I'm sure people have told you this, be very careful what you say because everybody's related to everybody. Not that you'd ever say anything snarky about anyone. Okay, well here's the Cloud family. So you can see that this is also suggest edits. We can actually find out who's in charge of this memorial by clicking on this and it will say the person in charge. But say you're looking at this and you go, oh, I have some photographs I would like to add. You can do that. So let's just do a little exercise here. Let's find, we're in Evergreen. Let's find Johnny Peterson. Remember, how many of you do FaceTime? Right? You do FaceTime? Okay, so Norm Clow, bless his heart, he gives us so many fantastic photographs for the Valley, does he not? Are you aware of how many things Norm Clow adds? So what we're going to do right now is we're going to add a photo. So you can add a photo to any entry. Let me just back up just a tiny bit. Is your family on Find a Grave? Do you know? You may not know because this is volunteer run. So people go to cemeteries and they go ahead and make an entry. They're not a family member, but they get it up. So what you can do is if you find your family member on Find a Grave, you can ask to have the memorial transferred to you. You don't need to. You can add things to it anyway. But if you want to be in charge of exactly what is said, and you just want to link all the family members, you want to be really busy with it, and create an album for your family, then I would ask to have it transferred. And I beg you to ask me to transfer the memorial to you because that's wonderful. Because, you know, this should outlive me, and I want you to be in charge. So we're going to add a photo right there. See, add photos. Okay, this is just an exercise. We're going to add a photo. So there it is. We're going to drag and drop this wonderful photo. See this wonderful photo? Is that sweet? Okay, so what we're going to do right now all together is we're going to, now remember all we did was hit add photo. We found the memorial, we said add photo. That's all you have to do. Now we're going to just drag and drop it. And when it adds it, we are going, if I could get this thing to, I don't have the bottom of the screen here to tell me that it's added. I want this, yeah.
I bet it's added already.
Let's see. It did not add, so we'll do it again. There he is. There we go. That's what I want. Okay, I've already put that it's John Peterson and Mildred Ray. So let's come up with a citation. Is there anything you want to say about that photograph? Do you want to explain anything about it? You want to say it's Johnny P? Because that's kind of cool, using his nickname. So we could say Johnny P and Mildred, and we don't know exactly where it is, but we could say, I can't remember when Mildred died, but anyway, we could say in the 80s, 70s. It looks like their house. So they lived on Indian Creek. So shall we say Johnny, Pete, and Mildred on Indian Creek? And we won't try to figure out the date. You good with that? Okay. Okay. So then we say done. Okay, now that will be then on his memorial, which is pretty cool. See? And we did that. So, my suggestion for any of you who like to post historical photos and you know the people in them and they're buried at the AV cemetery, start dragging and dropping photos. And what happens is the whole community benefits. It becomes a community album. Okay? So going back to this information here, how do you know if your family member is on Find a Grave? Just Google them. If you Google your family member's name with their birth year and their death year, one of the first hits you'll get is Find a Grave. So that's really easy. You don't even have to go to the site, because here you can search memorials, you can search cemeteries, you can do all kinds of searches. There's lots of things you can do with this, but the easiest thing is just go to Google, look up the person's name, and then click on it when you get a Find a Grave hit. Okay. So there's also an app that you can have. It's free, and you can have it on your phone. So if you just go to a cemetery somewhere and you don't know anything about that cemetery and you open up that app, it'll tell you the cemetery you're in. That's crazy. Crazy. And then it'll give you the list. That'll give you 1,650 memorials. Click that, and then you'll click by last name. You can click all sorts of ways. And so then you can find your person. Now, if you're really lucky, which you are with Johnny, okay, I want to do one that's my very own, okay? So it's so much easier for me. Oh, sorry. The mapping feature is on your phone, not the website. So if we go to somebody and we go to a person on the Find a Grave app on your phone, and then you're in there, and then you go to somebody's, I'll just go to anybody. I'll go to somebody you know. Why don't I do that? Babcock's Bailey. I'm going to go to Kathy's parents. Right, Kathy? All right. I can't show you this, but I'm on Find a Grave, and I'm going to Kathy's dad, Edward Bailey, from Bluff, Scott County, Illinois. Died in 1967. Now, you know these old cemeteries, they don't have maps, right? And the graves, they're all private, they're old, and they're not in rows and columns. It's hopeless. It's even hopeless when they're in rows and columns because you don't know the numbering system. So, you get out. So, if I hit map it right now, I want to go to Edward Bailey's grave. It tells me to drive 9 minutes. It tells me, go. You know how to do Google Maps, right? It tells me to leave Anderson Valley Way. It tells me to turn right. Then it tells me to turn left. And then it brings me all the way, which is tricky. Shields is tricky. You got to figure out how to get to Shields. It's not heavily advertised. You got to go past the Gallon's fruit stand, take a hard right, take a hard left, turn right immediately, wander back. It'll tell you. Okay, then you get out of your car and you make your dot on your phone. Takes a little practice, but you walk around and you go, go on farther, going closer. Left, no. So you spend some time learning how to do it. But when your dot is over Edward's dot, you're standing in front of his grave.
Pretty cool.
Very cool. Okay, so that's important to know. Okay, if you know your family member is buried in a cemetery, and I'm not just talking about AV, I'm talking anywhere, where you have a family member, you know they're buried somewhere, but they don't have an entry in Find a Grave, then you can go ahead and add them to that cemetery. No problem. They walk you through it. It's extremely user-friendly, except when they keep cutting out. So what you do is you're going to go to, let's say I wanted to add somebody to Evergreen, and it'll say, sorry, it's just a little delay. There. It'll say, I need the next screen, I need it down. Okay, so you can add, here you go. You can add a memorial. So just go ahead and make sure all your family members are up. They're on a Find a Grave list somewhere, and then they're all set. And then they get that number that you just helped me, write down for Margaret. So you can then start uploading photographs. You can add biographical information. I don't know if it's like you can do 40 photographs. You can do endless Word document stuff. It's just amazing how much you can put in there free. If you want to, if you don't mind looking at ads, I don't mind ads, I don't even see them. But if you really don't like ads, you can also sponsor it, and then you don't see ads anymore. If that's important to you, then you can do that. But you have to be at the cemetery to pin it. And what I mean by pinning is you give it a GPS coordinate. So I have gone to 1,760 graves, and I have pinned. I have pinned every grave except Jimmy's family because I can't get connectivity at Ingram yet. Maybe someday I will. So, but anyway, the only place you can drop a pin is if you're standing at the grave, right? And I don't really know. If I've tried to put in GPS from home for somebody because I knew it from my photographs, and it says you are too far from the cemetery. So, yeah, I think so. So that's important too, because then these little rural cemeteries, people will not find the grave if they're just walking around. For one thing, is there's no system, and second of all, graves, headstones are very, very hard to read sometimes. Very hard to read. So I'm going to talk about that. Okay, so if there's no memorial for the person, you can add it. And I find it so much easier to add it on my laptop. I'm not very good with my thumbs. But then it comes up. It comes up on the app, and it comes up on the web. So we've already talked about you can use the map it feature. So you take a plane to St. Paul, Minnesota, and you rent a car and already hit map it, and it'll tell you the 50-mile drive, and it'll tell you all the turns, and then it'll tell you take you right to the grave. Okay, crazy. Okay, we've already talked about setting it up so that people can add stuff, how to find out. Now, this information at the end here is from Rick Eversole and from Gary Galeazzi. The Galeazzis have North Bay Monument, and they started back in 1860. And that was not Kendall, that's you. Anyway, I have that information. So it was bought by Galeazzi's in 1930. And if you know the old Railroad Square in Santa Rosa, anybody know that at all? Mm-hmm. Okay, so until, I guess not that recently, I don't know when, the old North Bay Monument place was there on Wilson Street. And so they moved down to Roanoke Park. But they're very nice and they're very helpful. And I said, how in the world did people get monuments back in the day? You've seen some of these. They're massive. And so I asked Rick and I asked Gary, and he said, well, people would order them, and then of course the company would deliver them. So they bring them up on trucks, and it could take a whole day, and they had, they don't have cranes, what do you call it when they have block and tackle, and they mounted these huge things. And then I had a lot of newspaper.com hits for the various salespeople coming to Mendocino. And so Rick explained what happens is they would let everybody know that they were going to be at a cemetery putting one up, and anybody else that wanted a monument could meet them, and they have catalogs and everything else, and they could figure it out. Or they could get down to Santa Rosa at some point and go in and order their monument. So that's the way they did it.
Would they give you a break if you got theirs brought up at the same time as someone else?
I can't speak to what they did in 1860. Okay, so this information is from the Galeazzi, Gary Galeazzi. Can you clean your family headstone? Yes. He said, yes. But remember, what you're supposed to only do your own or get permission. And use a soft bristled brush, diluted Dawn dish soap, plenty of water. So you wet the headstone down, you apply the Dawn, you gently scrub with a brush, and then you rinse it off. And obviously you don't use harsh chemicals or power washing or anything like that. And again, it's only your own headstone. So you can wash them, which would really have helped me a lot if they were all washed, because it's tough to read them. My husband developed a pretty good system where he took a flashlight and he projected the light up, and it created this wonderful, how would you describe it, topographical thing, so that you could actually read. And you could read stuff that you can't even believe you were going to be able to read. So I recommend, if you're searching, bring a little flashlight with you. It really is helpful. Okay, so are there any questions about the database that you're holding? Mark. Well, we'll do, he's being a gentleman. Margaret.
So when you go to this website, when you go to this particular website, it's easy to input the name of the cemetery. And if you input an evergreen, you're gonna end up with a whole bunch of evergreen cemeteries all over the country or whatever.
Well, they make it easy because you put in evergreen and they put in what county.
Okay, so
The only reason you're in trouble with evergreen in Mendocino is that there's 4. But it'll say Boone.
Right, okay.
So Mark.
I like the technical stuff as much as the next person, but I'm much more interested in the stories behind these entries. Are you going to get into that at all? I mean, paternity, affairs, crimes, illegitimate children, adoptions. It's all sort of buried in this database indirectly.
That's a
And,
different
and, and how do we know, for example, that a particular offspring is the legitimate offspring of the person listed? Is that what, you just take their word for it, or what?
So you want to do a once over lightly and just have all of the illegitimates pop up?
No,
That's not the way it
no,
works.
no, I'm not expecting that. I'm just saying, how do we know, for example, that somebody is that parent of that child?
Research.
Biologically or some other way?
Research, right. Well, with DNA, who knows? Right? I mean, some people formally adopted children that weren't their own, and some just raised the ones that might not have been their own. And, you know, back in the day, lots of genealogy has kind of gone by the wayside because the only thing that tells the absolute truth is DNA. So there's that. But, you know, as a local genealogist, I am extremely respectful of your families and your lives. I don't put anything in the database that's sketchy, that's uncomfortable. If it's uncomfortable, facts, it might be facts, but I'm imagining you reading it. And it matters more to me that my facts are just minimal than exposing something you might not want out there in the world. So no, I don't have a lot of salacious things, but I did bring people who are going to talk about murders and stuff, because it's their family, and they can do it. But as far as where I'm coming from, I want you to know that I'm very, very respectful. So I do not put people on Find a Grave shortly after anybody dies, because that's your business. But if 6, 7, 8 years go by, and I know you, I might call you. Do you want help? Do you know about this? And there's quite a few people that I know that I contacted, especially when I'm trying to get them their military plaque. It's very important for them to get their free U.S. military service plaque. So I might contact you, but that's only to help you. I wouldn't impose what I want you to do. That's your business. So if somebody, but I will say that as soon as you put a headstone in a cemetery, that's public. So if it's there, anybody who is a stalwart volunteer for Find a Grave is going to go ahead and put it up. They're going to say, oh, this one's not up. Because I can search Find a Grave and I can find all the graves in any cemetery who do not have photos. And then I can go over and say, oh, this one's got a photo now. Click. And I can add it. So there's a legion of us. So it's not just me. If you put your family in a cemetery and they have a headstone, then somebody might come along and go ahead and put it up. They might not put it up as completely as I would, with all the links and the bio and everything else, but it'll get up there. That happened to Susan, Colin's sister. Yeah. So he was like, why did you do that? And I didn't do that. So you have to be a little, right, diplomatic. Okay, so let's get into some more good stuff.
One follow-up?
What, Mark? I'm used to him meetings all the time.
In the 90s, the birth records and death records were public information, but in the late 90s, the state, thanks to Jackie Spear, with a paranoia about identity theft, she passed a law that said birth records and death records are not public.
75 years.
Huh?
75 years.
And there's census data and so forth. I've done some of that. We used to run the death name, the people who died and the people who were born until they made that restriction. And now you have to be a relative, or you have to file a form and ask why, explain why you want the certificate or something. And it's much harder to do the research you're talking about because they've made that somewhat private, and I don't think there's any database anymore of.
That's why I love obituaries.
Right, but
That's
that's somewhat
obituaries.
spotty too. I mean, we try to
Yeah.
run spotty, and every year Captain Rainbow tries to read the people who died, and he doesn't know. It's just spotty.
The
And so
AVA is like
very
one of my,
difficult.
across my computer, whatever you call it. It's VAVA.
We have the coroner here, maybe he could shed light on it.
I know. Well, we're going to go right now into a very, very special project, and this will give you stories. What I did about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago was that as I researched everybody, I figured out where some people were, but there was no distinguishing marker. So I went, well, that's not good. So it should be coming out. So I did some research about their descendants, and I found as many descendants as I could. There's of this set of people who were pioneers without a headstone. So this is what the marker looks like. Ed Eversole did that for me, and anyway, so this is the information about Susan Stubblefield's husband. And I found his descendant. Okay, her name is Lori Allen, and she's a descendant of the Stubblefields, the Yorks, the Murrays, all sorts of people. So she did like 6 of them. So, that's not what I want to do. Sorry, you don't want to see my passport. How do we do this? I just want to go to the right. There we go. So there's George Sprinkles. So George was the one that died right after they arrived. And by the end of the year after they arrived December 1859. So he dies, and he's the first one at Yorkville, and it says that he was buried in Yorkville. And when you can't really call Cleve his stepfather, it was the husband of Susan who was his stepmother. So there you go. Anyway, they were buried side by side. So here's Lori, and this is an old. This is really cool. I want the cemetery managers to know how much I appreciate that they don't move stuff. It's very important not to move anything. And whatever you find, if you could just leave it there. Weed whackers are just anathema to headstones, and they just tear everything up. So it's wonderful that you have to appreciate how hard it is for these managers to keep things nice and not just, weed whack everything to death. So here is either George or Cleve, and so on. So these two are married side by side. And here is Mary Ann Stubblefield York. And what happened to her is she died last. Never do that. There is nobody to take care of your memorial. She has the most gorgeous memorials for her father and for her husband, and it says right on the memorial on the bottom, done by Mary Ann Stubblefield York. She's going to tell the world that she put that memorial in. So what happened with her is that she got buried to the side, and a tree was planted.
Oh, no.
There's what's left. This is what's left. This is the tree. And this is something else, sucker or small. And then if you look really carefully, this is why it's so important not to move anything. There are 3 stones, on the head side and on the foot side. And so those 3 stones, are 2 children with her and Richard, but also, just those 2. And baby York and Robert. That's supposed to have an L. Very sorry. I can't tell you how frustrating that is for me. You ever have that where you do something and somebody just transcribes it wrong, and that's that. So So we're going to go, maybe I'll just go there and with a marker put clowns. Okay, not happy about that. But there she is, Lori Allen. Now, we
That was
are...
the Rose lady?
Huh?
That was Mary Ann?
Stubblefield Rose.
Stubblefield Rose?
Okay, well, so here is, we're now in Evergreen B. And this is Susan Stubblefield's grave. Now, if the little history there is that little bit of a sparkle history there was that she and Robert Stubblefield did not get along. So at some point, she didn't get along with Marianne Williams, Marianne York either. So at some point, they separated. And she came down and went up to Bear Wallow for a long time. So she was at this end of the valley, and he was at that. So, how about that, Mark?
There we go.
There we go. And so, this is where her son, who got in a big fight in a bar, there you go, Mark, and they got in a fight, and that was Clody. Clody. Where's his? Okay, well, anyway, Clody, it says right in the book that he was buried at the cemetery, and this is a Stubblefield Rose. And his wife is buried here. So we said, okay, Stubblefield Rose, we're going with that. And here is a wonderful story. This is Maria Ambrosia Higuera Smalley. And this is what was often called the very first grave at B. This one. Anybody ever see that? And you probably aren't as, you're not as familiar with the graves as I am. Anyway, cool, right? Cool. Bricks, all of this. Didn't know who this was. Until I contacted, through Ancestry, I found Janet Davey, who's done an amazing amount of research. And this is her information, and she wanted to be here, so she's very sorry, but she could not be here today. So Maria Smalley's given name is Maria Ambrosia Higuera, and her family history is fascinating. She has 3 sets of great-grandparents who traveled north from Sinaloa, Mexico, as part of the De Anza expedition. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty basic California history, so go look it up. Mary's mother, Juana Maria Bojorquez, how do you say that? Bojorquez?
Borges.
Say it for me.
Borges, like Gabriel Garcia Borges.
Really loud.
Borges.
Borges. Thank you so much. Okay, then I should you read this. Is a daughter of Bartolome Borges. Bartolome was a recipient of an 1845 Rancho Laguna de San Antonio land grant approved by the California Governor Pio Pico. And if anybody wants this, I will send you this page. But I have all the information about Rancho Laguna. It's, you know where Olampali is? Everybody know Olampali down on Novato?
Yeah.
That's kind of where it is. It's a little bit west of there. A little south of Two Rock, west of Olampali. Anyway, he lost most of that land from court battles. But even at the end of Maria's life, she and James Smalley, who was our sheriff back then, were listed as heirs. And her father died when Maria was 4 during a Bear Flag Revolt incident. So these 2 soldiers needed gunpowder. They went to the Rancho Laguna and they had a fight, and her father was killed. So they left with the gunpowder, and if you ever want to do research, this is an amazing story. They were, you know where Sinead Boulevard or Sinead Road is? That's where they got caught by the Mexican militia. And I'm not even going to tell. Oh, Mark wants to hear. Okay, so, disemboweled, hung up in a tree, choked with their own entrails, lived through it for a while, finally died. Unbelievable torture. So there you go, Mark. So Maria's grandmother was a Pacheco.
Wasn't exactly what I was in.
She was related to the Berryessas and Carrillos. And she probably, Janet thinks, she met James Smalley because he was in business with Carrillo. And lastly, if you want to do research and read some really interesting things, Joaquin Murrieta lived with the Borges family for 2 years. So, now, the bear flag, do you remember Dick Maccabee in his presentation a few months ago saying that that he knew the Elliots, and Bill Elliott was one of the racers of the Bear Flag incident. Well, 50 feet from Maria is Elliott's mother. And all it says on it is Grandma Elliott. There are 3 sisters, 3 Weaver sisters. One was married to a Maccabee, one was married to an Ontes, and one was married to a Cathay. And the Cathay guy was in Yorkville. So she's buried. She died in childbirth, and she and her baby are at the base of a massive madrone where my parents are buried. So I knew she's been with her. So anyway, this is what it looks like now. That's what's on top of her brick. And this is Elise. Elise Clow was the brother, Ed Eversole, another error. I can tell you how many times I redid this. Her, Carl Henry Clow's wife, Lenora, died. After her 5th child, she lived 2 more months, and she died. And Elise was a teacher. So she left teaching to raise his children until he remarried quite a few years later, about 10 years later. Then he had another child. So this is kind of a little upsetting what I'm going to show you now, okay? This always gets me. So what you see there is a footstone that is lost, its monument. Where is the monument? We don't know. However, a family member, before 1980, took a photograph of it. It was there then. So, in the winter of 79-80, we had a tremendous amount of vandalism. Here you go, Mark. What did I say?
December 1980, winter?
79.
The school year 79-80, put it that way. It was kids with a truck and ropes. Massive vandalism. So, this is Mary Stone. So she's been repaired. But Clyde found her in the shed. And he put her up where he found a spot right by the parking area. And he said, I don't know where she goes, but there's a nice spot here. But he picked in a brilliant way because she's right next to her brother, Robert Byrd. So, fine. Here's Joseph Rawls, broken, repaired. And here's Cynthia Rawls, his wife. And there's Elise. And here's Blanche. Ow. And here's Louisa Owen. Joseph Owen. There's my husband's flashlight technique. See how cool it works?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't scrape that off. And here's Elizabeth. Oh, I'm going to show you that one. Sorry, that's okay. So there you go. It's all a mystery. Where's Elizabeth's headstone? We don't know. Not at the cemetery. Okay, moving on. Kathy Bailey. Kathy, come on up.
Okay.
This is a very sweet story, and it's all due to Kathy Bailey. A little sad and a little sweet.
You got any kind of lead into this?
Well, this is the child. His name is Colin Cookson, and he was the son of Ray and Rachel Cookson, which I got from Death Records. And he was underneath a truck, and he got killed at 16 years old. So, you tell the rest.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Kathy Bailey. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm a newcomer. I moved here in 1971.
Very good.
And so in moved here in 71, and about 74, I moved to Schwind Road in Navarro, and became friendly with George Gowan, who at the time was taking care of the cemeteries. And in 1983, I had the need to bury a family member, and the farthest this way I'd ever lived was at the Mills Estates there across from Bachman Hill, and I didn't particularly feel any closeness to the Evergreen Cemetery. And I knew about the Shields Cemetery because I was also a friend of Bob Glover's from being on Schwind Road and for other reasons. And so I asked George whether I could bury my family member, my son, who had been killed in a car accident at the age of 6 3/4, and whether I could bury him at Shields Cemetery. And George said yeah. And but he explained, so I think we must have gone up there and looked around, and he explained that the place where somebody who wasn't an old timer was going to be buried was down at the bottom of the hill there. And you know, all the old timers, the Schmidts and whatnot, were up the top, Gumleys and you know, everybody are up at the top, but there was this section down below, which George warned me, you know, was maybe a little damp, there might be some water flow through there, one thing or another. I said, fine, George, it's fine, you know, so under an oak tree. And so we did bury my son there. And a few days after that, I happened to be back in the cemetery, and Ray Ingram was planting flags for Memorial Day there. So it would have been a few days before Memorial Day in 1983. And so we got to talking, and we'd met each other before and whatnot. And so anyway, we started talking, and right above my son's grave, which is, as I said, at the bottom, there's a draw that you can see that goes up the hill. And he said that his friend Colin was buried there in the draw, and you know, that he'd been killed, and you know, suddenly, and that his folks didn't have the financial ability to do a headstone and whatnot. And he just started weeping. You know, I mean, he was probably in his 60s at the time, you know, I don't know. Anyway, he was a grown man, he was weeping over his friend who died when they were 16. And so it made a big impression on me. And I, you know, made a mental note of this draw, which was pretty prominent.
Daffodils.
Pardon?
Daffodils.
Daffodil, well, yes, I'll get there.
Okay.
I'm just going on and on. So anyway, yeah, so I'm conscious of that. Now, maybe 10 years ago, it's hard for me to know, 10, 12 years ago, time goes, you know. Brad Wiley was doing a daffodil planting project at cemeteries. And so we went to the cemetery, and I had him plant daffodils in this place where Ray had told me Colin was buried. And so that was sort of my attempt to, you know, get that place marked. And I have to say, at that time, I'm sure Ray must have told me this young man's name, but I didn't retain it. I didn't know the name until Valerie did the research. And so, you know, what we know, and, you know, exactly, you know, the truck, all of that, that's all because of Val's research. I would have had zero recollection of that. So when Val was doing her marker project here, I don't even know.
You and I went out and ran around with tape measures.
Right. And so, how did you find his name?
Through databases,
Okay.
deaths,
Okay.
Mendocino County deaths.
All right. Okay.
And then a newspaper article about him.
There we go. So, in the advertiser? No, I don't remember.
Back then, I don't know.
So we decided to, you know, Val was kind enough to be willing to make this marker for him. And so you just had it on the screen before. And
Yeah.
shifted.
So this was our work. We borrowed a couple of 100-foot markers, and we made 68 feet from there, 64 feet from there, 59 feet from there. We triangulated it. We're very proud of ourselves. And then, but we can't take any credit for the marker because Hans made it. Thank you, Hans.
Yeah, really. And so this is in the spot where, you know, more or less where Ray showed me his friend was buried. And so that's that one. And then we moved on to Tanbark pretty quick here. Again, my son's down at the bottom. Oh, and if you were wondering what my father was doing buried at Shields if he died in 1967, along the line, my mom moved here, eventually she died, and meanwhile she'd been carrying my father's urn around with her all this time. He died in Minneapolis. And so after my mom died, I wanted to bury them together, and so at the time, Mr. Doggett was the cemetery person, and so we got permission to do all that, and so my mom and dad are buried there along with my son, and behind these areas, right at the very edge of the grave, there's an old wooden headstone about like that tall. And you just can't, even I think with your husband's flashlight
Yes.
thing, it'd be pretty tough to see.
It was tricky.
Tricky, but anyway, so this guy's name, you used to, when I first go into the cemetery, you used to be able to see these names better. So it was Tamar Johnson. And either I'm remembering this wrong or he had it wrong. I remember that Bob Glover told me that this guy was a black guy. And that's why his nickname was Tamar. Well, it turns out when Val does the research, he's from Norway.
He was a
only black guy in Norway, or he was from that far north place where there were some indigenous guys. I don't know.
It's a game of telephone genealogy.
Yeah. So anyway, so Tamar now has a semi-readable, a readable marker, and so that's us.
Thank you so much for doing that. Down by the road, AV Way, there's a section for the cemetery, the Anderson Valley Evergreen Cemetery, and it has a quite large curb, double grave, and all their family is around them. This is James and Susan. So James Berry and Susan Cameron. Do you recognize the name Cameron? Cameron Road?
Right next to there, right?
So that's, this was done by, what's Berry that repairs the bulldozers? Jim Berry. Jim Berry did this one. And then here's the Witherells. And again, this is the same person who did several others. So there are two graves. There she is. Lori. Whoop, I got these out of order. You're going to have to just look at this for a minute. So there are two graves. If you've ever been in the B section, sorry, we're just going to go do that. There's a bigger grave, and then there's a small grave, and they've lost their names. But doing the research, and if you like puzzles, this is a great hobby for you. It's just wonderful. I'm like those murder mystery shows where they have a whiteboard and names and arrows and places, and I think, that's where he is. And so this boy, it was John, I think 19, died in a logging accident. A lot of logging accidents in this valley, guys. A lot of logging machinery. Whew. And this is the baby. So it's very small, little small. Okay, almost done. There's Clodagh. He's buried next to his. He died first, and then she was buried next to him. And there's the stubble field from Rose from another perspective. And then we're going to wait for Matt to do that. So we'll stop with that. And then let's see. So what we're going to talk about. Well, John is going to come up now because John has a fascinating story. Because, you can't bury people at home anymore. Did you know that? What was the name of the supervisor who buried his wife?
Dan Hamburg.
Dan Hamburg did it, but you're really not supposed to. And Jimmy is going to come up in a little bit, and he's going to tell us after John what the procedure is if you want to have a private cemetery and if it's possible. So, John, come on up, and you're going to tell them about the Haynes Ranch.
Ready for me?
I am. He's using his microphone, protesting it, but we want him to use a microphone, right?
Yes.
Yes.
The little minis. We're all getting hard of hearing.
favorite part of Hamburg came was after he buried her there, he sold the property, moved to Oregon.
Yeah, right.
I'm John Haynes, third generation California.
Sit down.
I will sit down because I can't stand up very long.
It's all ready, John.
Gotta do everything slow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm making him use this. Not happy with me.
So, my grandfather, John Herbert Haynes, a lieutenant in the Salvation Army.
Sorry, now they want you to be louder, so move up. I mean, lean
Raise the
forward.
mic a little bit.
I know, it's very frustrating.
I'm not used to this. Rod Baysharp taught us how to talk loud enough. Anyway, so they want me to use the mic. Okay. So not natural for me. My grandfather, John Herbert Haynes, a lieutenant in the Salvation Army, arrived in North Coast area approximately 1895. He was an outrider with the Salvation Army that traveled from settlement to settlement performing services. And that was before there was any roads in this country. They were, well, not very good ones. And he had to swim across rivers to get.
Wow.
Anyway, by 1898, he was captain when he married Sarah Larmor from his hometown in Canada. They had their first child in October of 1899, my father, born in the Shaw House in Cloverdale. They didn't have a residence here yet. In 1900, right after my dad was born, John and Sarah, with a newborn son, Ward, moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, to help with the smallpox epidemic. With them was Sarah's brother and sister, Barney and Mary Larmar. They all had to be vaccinated for the smallpox. Thus, my dad was vaccinated as an infant. Sometime in 1903, they all moved to Sonoma and Mendocino counties. Not long after they returned, Barney had a machine shop in Cloverdale. He also had a big 10-room house. Mary met Nick Campbell, who was a large homestead owner, which was located in the center of which is now Haynes Ranch. That homestead was 5 miles from the county road. And they didn't have, they just had trails, horse trails. Okay. The Campbell house was 5 miles from Mountain View Road. Mary and Nick got married. You met Nick Campbell. Mary and Nick got married, and when Mary neared birthing time of her 2 children, she rode a horse to my grandparents' homestead on Mountain View Road to give birth. I presume she came out and helped my grandmother give birth every time she gave birth, because other than my dad Ward, all the other children were born on Mountain View Road. They had 10 children, only 7 survived. Anyway, my grandparents had bought a squatter's house and filed the homestead papers. So then they had a residence. By 1917, Uncle Barney, who also had established a homestead south of Mountain View Road, and Ward had bought 80 acres from his Aunt Mary, the one that married Campbell. Anyway, during the Depression in 1932, Uncle Barney, cousin Clark Campbell, one of the ones that was born from the Campbell homestead, and my dad Ward had combined their properties, which founded a partnership called Larmor, Haynes, and Campbell, in the tradition of the oldest person was named first. In 1936, Uncle Barney died and left his 1/3 to my parents, who shortly thereafter bought out Campbell. Campbell complained that he didn't have any profit over the partnership. Well, there was no profit. You were lucky to break even. Anyway, that's when the property became Haynes Ranch. So that would have been in 1936. Uncle Barney, and one of the reasons I was asked to be here, his death founded a cemetery. When he died, anyway, Uncle Barney was buried near where he was living, just south of Mountain View Road. He was the only one buried there until my nephew, Christopher Haynes, died in 1962. My mother, Ruth Haynes, died in 1963, and then she was buried there. Then my father, Ward, died in 1987, and he's buried there. A cousin, Benjamin Giddings, one of my mother's sister's children, had spent a lot of time at the ranch. And he was living in Fort Bragg. He had died from cancer. So he asked for his ashes to be put there. Then the last person buried there was when my brother Roger died in 2017. But there was also another, maybe one of my nephews, Jason Haynes, had a heart attack when he was up at the ranch, and he asked his ashes to be there. I think there's about 10 people that are either ashes or buried there. The ones that had stones was Uncle Barney, nephew Chris, my mother, and my dad were the only ones that had stones before. So that's it.
Thank you.
My grandfather was, where he homesteaded, he had to fence his homestead in, and fencing it in caused a feud. It's hard for me to get stood
Well, it's
up.
not a great table for civility, is it?
So I had one question.
Really,
So John, did you have to file some papers ever to say this is a, or is
the
that?
point is, what we learned was, once someone is buried somewhere,
Yes,
you don't need any more paperwork
That's
to
right.
bury someone there.
right.
There's no place that you go to.
Yeah.
I would like to get the Haynes Cemetery registered so that if people are looking up a name, they can find it. But it's on private property and it's not accessible. So would they have, but I guess if you made a registry, you could note that they had to ask for permission.
It would have helped in a way. It's up to you, and you're correct, that when you already have people buried on your property and you've maintained it, you are grandfathered in,
Yeah.
literally.
And you start.
Which was, and you can go to find a grave, and you can be the Haynes Ranch Cemetery, and you can say private, no access except without permission. And it would have helped because somebody was doing research. I showed him that his dad ended up with a memorial in Rawls Babcock. And it made sense because
My
his
grandfather.
grandfather Ward, it made sense because his parents are there. So this person must have just assumed, well, he must be there too. Well, you can't really make assumptions. It's very dangerous. So had you had him listed at the ranch house, this person would have made that error. So we have to correct that error. We have to contact them.
So my grandfather was buried at the Babcock, I think it is.
Yes, Rawls
Cemetery.
Babcock.
And he didn't have any kind of, but one of the little markers that the county puts on there for years. They funded enough of the brothers that had money and bought him a stone. But then when my grandmother died, she had lived in Boonville for years, she was buried next to him, and then she had a second husband after she was
Athelson.
widowed. And and his name was Axelson, and he's buried right, so there's my grandfather, my grandmother, and Axelson right next to each other.
Nice order.
Anyway, it's nice that they did that.
Yes. So there, just to correct a misconception, the county doesn't put markers in the cemeteries. The mortuaries put temporary markers. Some of them last a very long time. So Jimmy's going to come talk about what his family went through to get the Ingram Cemetery up and going, and especially the story about his dad.
One more thing.
Okay.
The people who had ashes put there, they also put markers on there.
Yeah.
Some sort of a little sign of some sort.
You can put ashes anywhere, guys.
If they're put in a jar, they have to be buried 18 inches.
Oh. But what if they're roots?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
You can stand up or sit down.
Howdy. This on? No.
It's on, we can hear you.
It says it's on.
Hello. Now it's on. So I guess I'm here to kind of explain the Ingram Cemetery. So when my mother was nearing her end and she really wanted to be buried on the ranch, we researched to start a private cemetery, and besides a mountain of paperwork, you had to have the amount of a non-refundable deposit to maintain the cemetery was prohibitive.
Can I just tell them what it was? How much?
Yeah.
$300,000.
It just so happened, I found out that the Anderson Valley Cemetery District was looking for additional property because things are filling up. So we sold them 2 acres of our ranch to start the Ingram Cemetery. So that's how that came about. And final paperwork for the sale was my mother signed it about a week to 10 days before she passed. But what had happened is my dad had passed much earlier, and it was a sudden surprise quickly. He said we weren't prepared. All we knew was that the Cloverdale Cemetery was full. So by default, he ended up in Santa Rosa Memorial Park. So she wanted to be together, so we arranged to have him transferred. So he was the very first occupant of the Ingram Cemetery. He got put in shortly before we did my mother's funeral service.
But it was a big, tell about this concrete.
Oh, yes. So at the time, I think they required it in Santa Rosa because they don't like to have graves, you know, as the coffin deteriorates and the graves settle in. And so they required liners, what they call liners. So the coffin is put into it. At that time, they were using concrete boxes. And so he was in one of those. So what they did is they just exhumed the whole box and put it in some poor little pickup that was about like this. And when they unloaded it with the excavator, the pickup probably came up about a foot. At any rate, so that's all we did. We just put him in there. My mother has a liner too, but now they're PVC instead of concrete.
And then the Dons. You brought them.
Well, yes. I also brought in my great-grandparents, Ingrams, Irvin Ingram and his wife. That's why it's named Ingram Cemetery. That's also Ingram Creek, right, that runs past it, and he's the one that had first purchased the ranch in 1911. Then my grandparents, my mother's parents, transferred them into there. I got my sister in there. Terry's mother's in there now. I have a cousin way down in the far corner, and that's where he belongs.
There we go.
There you go, Mark.
So, any other questions about?
What did
The
you
Ingram Cemetery was established in 2015.
So people should know that your mother wrote an amazing book. And it's recollections of growing up on a ranch in Yorkville and Cloverdale. So that gave a lot of background information when I was doing the research, besides Jimmy. So now, last but not least, we're going to do Matt. Come on up, Matt Kendall. This is what probably, I don't know, but we have a competition in front of.
I'm not sure what you want me to talk about.
Well, let's look at your, I bet you if you just look at these,
Oh,
it'll spark something. So here is,
Yeah, I'm trying to see that. That's young Ichabod's grave.
yes,
So in my family, we always called him Y.I. My father referred to his great-grandfather or his great-great-grandfather as Y.I. The Kendalls in Mendocino County, we know where they're all buried because all 5 kids wound up in a pickup truck with my father every weekend, building something, doing something, and if we had to go over to the coast to get cattle or something, my great aunt and uncle were John and Leah Quistapachi, and they had a dairy over there in Irish Beach. My father worked for Mark's uncle, our old supervisor. Joe Scarmella owned the garage down in Point Arena, and so when Dad got back from the service and married my mother, he worked for Mendocino County as a heavy equipment operator, but my mom worked at the general store there, and he would go over and he would pump gas for Joe Scarmella. We know where all the graves are because we were constantly stuck with my father, and every time that we went any place, he had shovels and rakes and tools, and it was our job to clean off the family graves.
great.
My mother was a big genealogist, and when she passed, my wife kind of took that on. My wife is from Boonville, or her family's from Boonville. Her grandfather was Bob Daniels, the logger. And so we spent a lot of time in the cemetery over here because when she and I married, she wanted to know where our family, my side of the family, came from. Now, my wife has a cousin. I gotta tell you a story about old Clyde Doggett.
Who is it?
Old Clyde Doggett. My wife has a cousin who grew up here in Boonville who will remain unnamed, and he's a bit of an outlaw. He doesn't live here anymore. He lives over in Nevada somewhere, but he was working over here, and we used to go get abalone on the coast on a Sunday, and then we'd always swing by the cemetery and I'd clean off the graves. Drinking beer, you know, we were younger, 40s. He was in his 30s, I was in my 40s. Every time that we stopped there, Clyde would come over and want to visit and ask what my in-laws were doing. Next thing you know, he's digging around in the bed of my truck and gets himself an abalone. Every time. Well, at the time, the limit was 4 abalones. And so we'd gone over to the coast, we got our abalones. My wife's cousin grabs a 6-pack of beer, we drive over to the cemetery, I get out the rakes and whatnot. Sure enough, Clyde comes over. What you remember how Clyde talked? What are you guys doing? What are you doing? Yeah, we're working on this over here. How's Jimmy and Nancy? Next thing you know, he makes his way over to the bed of my pickup truck. And by God, he gleans an abalone out. Well, you guys got one too many of these, so I'm just going to tell you, this happened every time. So we got back to my house. By golly, I opened up my dive tube, and there was 4 abalone in there, and there was 4 in Daniel's tube. And I said, I thought Clyde got an abalone. And he said, he did. I popped one for Clyde. And I go, you know you're going to go to jail for stuff like that. And he goes, no, I put it in your tube. And I thought to myself, yeah, I'm going to lose my job over you throwing it. And after that, every time that we came back from the coast, I would ask him, you didn't grab one for Clyde, did you? And I would check my tube to make sure that I hadn't grabbed one either. Anyway.
Okay, so you've got more family.
So there was Melissa, who remained here. My father's great-grandfather, one of his wives, one of Y.I.'s wives is buried there, and then Melissa, my father's great-grandfather's twin sister, I believe that she died in Boonville, and she was married to J.D. Ball. And those 2 graves, Y.I., his second wife, and J.D. Ball and Melissa Ball, they're only about 40 feet away from each other. They're really close there.
And this is metal.
Yeah, that one's iron. You tap on it. It looks like it looks like it's made out of stone or something, but when you tap on it, it's hollow. It's still in pretty good shape.
So these are some more balls.
Yeah.
This is, Paz. How do you say that word? Paz?
Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paz is peach.
And here's Chardon.
And one of their sons, they had strange names on the Ball side of the family. One of their sons' names was Dream Life Ball, and he's buried over in the cemetery in Little River there, right at Little River Airport Road.
Flashlight technique.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, here's, I'm sorry, Jimmy, let me just say, don't go away. So this is Jimmy's dad, Butch. There's his military marker and the family marker. Very nice, super nice. Okay, so what we're gonna do is a little tiny exercise. This is it, folks. You don't have to do any more with me. We're gonna go, this is evergreen, so let's find the partridge. This is, explain the partridge, people. The two brothers that was she married first before YA?
Yeah, I think that what happened was YI was married in Vermont, and his wife gave birth to twins, and then like a week later she died. And he farmed those two children out to an aunt, his sister, I believe. And then he came out to California, and he remarried out here, but he married a lady who had two children previously, and I thought her husband had died.
Oh, no, so, sorry, but Margaret's first husband was Carlos Partridge, and he died a couple of months after the oldest boy died. So he died in 1854 or something like that. But anyway, my research says that these are her sons. So what I'm going to do is show you guys right here is we're going to do something really cool, and this is the finale of our activity here. We are going to add their mother. So what was that number? Let's see, who remembers the number?
Oh, yeah, we remember.
Yeah, you remember that 297 if you told it to me correctly, 10618. And let's see. There she is. She came up. Is that cool? That is very cool. And what will happen now is if we go back to Margaret, she will be, save changes. Always save changes, guys. At the end of the evening, you look and you go, and save the changes. So we'll go back to her. And now we can click on her. There she is. She's your direct relative. And George is there. So I'll do the same thing at home for the other boy. So I encourage you to do that, and I just want to shout out to the cemetery managers. Right now it's Alicia Perez, and I have been in a lot of cemeteries because that's my hobby, and our cemeteries are beautiful. And I know people get impatient in the early spring when the grass is growing and the trees are dropping and everything else, but if you walk around, you see how beautifully they keep it. And as a genealogist, I want to say, I really appreciate how beautifully they're kept, and that nothing is, carted away because it's old or broken. So that's the end, unless there's questions. Yes, Terry.
Where's the old Yorkville Cemetery? I mean, Ingram is what I think of as Yorkville Cemetery.
Okay, so if you go to Yorkville Cemetery, you'll see that I've put the GPS. So let's just go to cemeteries. Go to my favorite cemeteries. I have a lot of them. A lot of our people were buried in the Chapel and Chimes in Santa Rosa. A little dry, you don't care. Cloverdale, full. But a lot of the old timers, because Yorkville was considered Cloverdale. Because they didn't have a road from Yorkville down to here for a long time. So that's why they just considered themselves Cloverdale people. Yeah?
I can show her where it is.
Okay, so I'm going to show her.
Ranch Road, right?
No. Oh, you're very close. Very close. I don't mean to say no to you so abruptly. Sorry. So here it is. And here's your coordinates. So you've passed Yorkville Ranch Road. You haven't gotten to Ron Rice's yet. And there's a long diagonal road that goes up the hill. And You can't really park up there because it's a ranch access, so you park at the bottom, walk up the steep drive. So what else can I tell you? There's the sign.
It's easy, but that sign doesn't show up so much on the.
Yeah, as with most things, you
You
gotta
can
know.
see
where to
some
go.
of the grays from Highway 128.
Yeah, I
If
can-
you take it
You
easy.
can see Guy Bronsolino's
Yes.
bridge from 128.
Yes,
There's generally American flags posted too.
yes, look for the flag. It's always been a flag right here, and they freshen them up in Memorial Day, Veterans Day. rather. Any more questions? That's it?